Alex Dale, part two of our podcast series together, where we're exploring grape varieties and different parts of the world where they originate from and are grown and how they express. And I think the next sort of topic is the heartbreak grape, Pinot Noir, one that is very close to your heart. And we were just talking a little bit earlier about how Pinot Noir, certainly for me, was that horizon. You know, I took a journey through wine, and in fact, I haven't actually quite done this yet, even though you've very kindly invited me, but I would love to one day visit Burgundy. It seems to be this mysterious place with this, mythical grape. But for most wine consumers, it's almost like a destination that takes some time to get to. I mean, I remember when we started under the influence, selling wine to a great friend of mine, and it was Bordeaux, and he wouldn't touch Burgundy. But now he's finally broken through that, probably what you would see as a Bordeaux barrier, and he's obsessed with Burgundy, and it becomes this obsession, right? Now he's got there. You were pretty much born there.
It's an enlightenment you're referring to.
Yes.
I cheated, or I was very lucky. I started in Burgundy, so it was just normal.
So you grew up in Burgundy?
Yeah, so I was born in England, as my accent suggests. I went to boarding school in England, but outside of boarding school, for the Christmas and Easter, for the summer and Easter holidays, we were in Burgundy most of the time. We had a property just outside Beaune, and not in the winter, because the winter is too bloody cold. So from as far back as I can remember, we always went to Burgundy when the weather was good. And I did my first harvest there. I got a concession from my then headmaster to go for 6 weeks during mock exams. So he obviously really wanted me to leave. So I got 6 weeks out, and I went and did a harvest in Mercury, for the Proto family. And when I was there, I just realised this is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
This is it. I'm fourth generation in wine in my family.
Yes.
But they're all merchants, importers, restaurateur. So first producer in the family, not the last. And so 16. At the age of 16, I did leave school. 1 year later, as I said to my father when I got back after the harvest when I was 15, I said, I can leave school in a year, can't I, legally? And he said, yes, why? I said, I'm going to go and live in Burgundy. And he was like, oh, that's so sweet. My little boy just did a harvest and he thinks he's going to live in Burgundy. And a year later, I was in Burgundy at age 16, which was, looking back at it, was pretty young, but at the time I thought I was an adult.
But it also holds true to the character that we all love and know, which is Alex Dale. I mean, if you set your mind to something, you go for it.
Yeah, that's not always a quality.
Maybe strength is also a weakness.
So I lived there until I was 29, and then I moved here.
Amazing. And, in that time, you developed incredible relationships. I believe you had one of the best known little wine bars in Burgundy. Whereabouts was that wine bar?
So we had a pub initially.
Okay.
And then I opened a wine bar subsequently, in the same building, but in the cellar, in this old 11th century vaulted stone cellar, which was just beautiful.
Wow.
And the pub was on the ground floor, and it's number 2 Rue Notre Dame, so it's on the road of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So Notre Dame isn't just in Paris. Most provincial towns have a church or a cathedral, whatever. They all do. Many. Beaune has, I think, 7 churches or something like that. But the major one, Basilique, is called Notre Dame. And so we were number 2 of that road. So it's right in the heart of Beaune. Beautiful spot. And we had an incredible customer base, nearly all of whom were in the wine industry. But also hospitality, because Beaune is a major tourism area. And Mondays, for example, we were open 7 days a week. It was my idea is if Burgundy, especially in the winter, you never know when people are open or not. So I was just like, we're going to be open 365 days a year. If people want to have a drink, they can come to my place. And so Mondays was packed full of, everybody works in hotels and restaurants because everybody else was closed.
Day off, yeah.
And that was one of the best nights because when you're working with people in the industry, they tip incredibly well, they drink well, they're polite because they know what it is. And then the growers, the producers, the farmers, the winemakers, and then for the big merchant houses, the sort of the guys in suits. Everybody came to our place, and because it was just really relaxed. And I made lifelong friends. You know, a lot of them I went to school with as well. I went to wine school in Beaune. But we just become lifelong friends, and they would come to my place to have a good time. So that's a good environment to make friends. And then I would go and visit them all in their cellars, because when you're a young person in Burgundy, you're an indentured labourer for your family. So you don't get any money, but you have food and lodgings and a car and access to great wine.
Yes.
So they all had keys to the cellar, and that was a key to a lot of fun and games as well.
Amazing. And I think that also leads us into Burgundy as a region. I mean, that's a huge topic of conversation, which I think we'll dive into another day. But it's so difficult to access those relationships.
Yes, and probably more so today, in fact, because in those days, one of my first jobs was I was export manager for one of the great families, the terroir family, and in those days you had to go and sell Burgundy. It wasn't famous like it is today.
Yeah.
Whereas today you're trying to keep buyers away because you don't have enough wine, and that's how the fortunes of Burgundy have changed in 2 generations, possibly 3. And so if it was hard to get in before, it's harder now.
Yeah.
But they're very special relationships. The Burgundians are, they're a little bit like their architecture. Everything on the outside is quite austere. And you open the door to the courtyard and you go into these most beautiful courtyards and stonework and this multicoloured tile roofs, and sort of the Flemish architecture of the Middle Ages. And it's just sumptuous inside, but on the outside, don't show that you've got something. Don't show wealth. Don't show character. And the Burgundians are a little bit like that. They're a little bit standoffish, as a not individually, but as a society.
Part of the culture. I mean, there's no grand chateau like Bordeaux.
But if you ever need a friend, if you ever in the shit, there's nobody that you want on your side more than a Burgundian.
Yeah.
They are. Don't even think about it. They're just with you, and they're lifelong loyal friends, and that suits my personality, and it allows us to explore that friendship through a glass repeatedly, even though I left 30 years ago.
Amazing.
It's like I never left.
Yeah.
It really is like I never left.
Yeah. Well, one of our team, Chad, was very fortunate. I think was he on honeymoon?
Yes, he was.
And it was just the absolute highlight joining you and some of.
And he joined us on a very good day.
Yeah.
He joined us on the Chassagne day, Chassagne Montrachet day.
Yeah.
And that's always a highlight, because we work with 3 domains from Chassagne, and 2 of them are their best mates since childhood, they're neighbours, and they're very naughty human beings. And the Maxim Jeroboams of wines, which you just price of a car,
yes,
for a wine, and they just pop open the corks and we swig them. It's just crazy. It's the wonderful celebration side of wine.
Yes.
With the most down-to-earth people in the world.
Yeah.
They have every reason to be arrogant and full of themselves and driving Ferraris and what have you. That's not them.
Yeah, I love
they
that.
Still live in the same house. They still drive the beaten-up pickup trucks or the panel vans with all their tools in to go into the vineyards. They drive the tractors themselves. They're in the vineyards at 5 o'clock in the morning. They have hands like leather. They're true farmers, labourers even.
Yeah.
And their children the same. And that has been lost in certain wine regions, including to a very large extent Champagne and Bordeaux. It's coming back with the younger generation, actually, along with the belief system of organics and biodynamics. It's really coming back. But Burgundy is very special in that regard. So the guy that owns the land is the one who's working the soil. And that's part of the fascination of Burgundy.
That's a massive part of the terroir, right? It's the culture.
So, I mean, you'll have if you speak to Jean-Claude Ramonet, for example, one of my oldest friends in Burgundy that we've imported since 30 years here, 29 years. He is reaching retirement, so his 2 daughters are in the business now and the team, but he's been ploughing those same furrows his entire life, and before him his dad did the same, and before him his dad did the same. And the knowledge that you gain of each individual vine and the different part of the slope and how the vine reacts to that, and therefore in the wine, and how to capture that and how to use that as a positive, et cetera, et cetera. you can't. Nothing replaces it. It's just it's time and the effort and the joy, and that's the joy. I mean, I have friends who now are in retirement age, but they just don't want to stop. So they're out on their tractor. They don't want to do any of the admin anymore. They don't want to do the heavy lifting anymore, but they want to be in the vineyards.
Yeah.
So they're out on their tractors every single day.
And they stay healthy for longer. And
Sorry, tapping on.
No.
Getting carried away. Sorry.
But it's also interesting to me how maybe that's why. I mean, and I love Bordeaux and I love wines from many regions, but that's maybe why, when we're seeking sort of the more overtly sort of opulent and flashy things as we maybe a bit younger, and then Burgundy's got this mystery and authenticity to it, which is, and also inaccessibility and scarcity. So
but it's a real purist grape as well, because Pinot is probably one of the most difficult grapes in the world, if not the most difficult to work with.
Unforgiving.
It is, and you make the slightest mistake, and everything you do afterward just amplifies it.
Okay.
If it's Chardonnay or if it's Cabernet Sauvignon or whatever, you can mask it.
Yeah.
Don't even notice it. In fact, sometimes it can be a positive. With Pinot, it's like if you get a little drop of, you're wearing a white shirt and you're going out to a special occasion or a dress or whatever, and you get a little drop of red ink on it, and you, rather than leaving it and it's hardly noticeable, you try and rub it off and you smudge it, and it's far worse than the little drop that nobody would have noticed. Pinot's the same. If you try and cover your tracks, you just make it so much worse. And it's also when you think you've done everything right, and you put the wine in the bottle and it just tastes like crap, and you're like, what happened? It was great. What earth is going wrong?
And then it might sing again after a year or two in bottle.
It is such a tricky grape, and but that's also, when something's really tricky, A, you have to be very dedicated to master it, and B, you get more satisfaction than anything else. So that's one of the reasons why Pinot is it's like the treasure at the end of the rainbow, and you can never get it, but you always want to make the perfect Pinot, which is impossible. Almost.
Brilliant. Okay, so guide me through this. And by the way, this is the wines that we've been tasting today, the Chenin Blanc and the Pinot Noir. It's a fantastic innovation. You've released these mixed cases of your Radford Dale wines with some of your imported wines. So we'll definitely try and link to those, because I think if anyone's listening and they actually want to drink these, we're very happy to ship them to you in different corners of Africa. But if you are in South Africa, it's pretty easy to order it online.
Yeah, it's taken on a life of its own. We didn't expect it to. We've had a huge response to it, and so tasting clubs, enthusiasts. Lots of people said this is a great idea, and we're hosting a tasting whatever event, and for once we've done something which actually results in sales.
Well, let's dive in. Al, where do you want to start us?
So we're going to start with, like we did previously, we're going to start with the international wines.
Okay.
Because that sets the tone,
Sure.
just as a little bit of a reference point.
Great.
And then we'll head back to South Africa.
Great.
For our,
do you want to start on your side, or should I?
This side. So
Okay.
rather like last time with the Chenin, we're going to kick off with a little bit of slightly more unlikely character, which is Austria.
Okay.
So I'll...
Brilliant.
Again. Perfect glass for this type of grape. So, where to start? I think with Pinot, climatically, it used to be that it would only, it was said to be limited to cool climate areas. But the whole notion of cool climate's been thrown on its head, because Burgundy is no longer cool climate. The average temperatures over the last 5 or 6 years in Burgundy have been way higher than Elgin, for example.
Really?
Yeah, way higher.
Because it's more continental, so it is more extreme.
Right. So you usually have very cold winters. The coldest I experienced was in 83, 84, and it was minus 24, the peak.
These vines must have been dying.
Yeah, some vines did, but for the most part, no. But in most winters it's -10, -12, that sort of thing. But in the summer it gets hot, but it's very humid. But because you have the very cold winter and you genuinely have 4 seasons, it's still considered a cool climate region.
And cool nights?
Not during the summer.
Okay, so days muggy.
Yeah. Whereas today, is it a cool climate region? Good question. And that's also going into a bigger debate about, how the nature of certain Pinot has changed in Burgundy. In that it's got riper, the alcohols are heavier, the colours have gone darker, and is this really Burgundy? But the climate has, if anybody doubts climate change, get into agriculture.
Yes, 100%.
It's if you go to Château de Chamiret in Mercury, the village where I started in my first vintage in '82, they have in their old winery, which they've restored, it's a beautiful building, stone building, they have these boards which go back to the 1700s, and they're sort of long boards of wood, and on each year you have the vintage, so the year, and they have a little symbol next to it which depicts the weather conditions, whatever, the nature of the characteristic of the, and then it says first date of harvest. And in the 1700s the first date of harvest was invariably mid-October. And then sometimes it'll be early October, in a really good year, the hotter years, the solaire years, they call them, the sunny years. It was end of September. And then you go through...
Wow. And mid-October, it's like being mid-April in a way. If you think about it, if you converted it to South Africa.
Yeah. So then you'd see, for 2 centuries, it didn't move. It was always sort of last week of September, second week of October. That was the bracket for beginning of harvest. And then... all of a sudden, you fast forward to the 1900s, and at the end of the 1900s, right at the end of the 1900s, you see it sort of late September, mid-September, and then in the early 2000s, all of a sudden, it's sort of early September to mid-September, and almost never in October. And then more recently, it's now August. It's now starting mid-August, and it rolls into early September. Wow. But so 2021 was the first time we actually went to late September. It was the first time in like 20 years. And we were experiencing that here. When I started here, we never picked in January. No. In my first 25 years here, we never picked in January. Now we picked. Yeah. This year we picked on the 15th of January.
Everyone was taken by surprise. Yeah.
So anyway, that was a bit of a detour.
No, but that's fascinating. I mean, that's like a historical record.
So I know
on a plank in Burgundy.
I have friends in Burgundy who over the last 10 years have been coming to us and asking us for advice on how do you make Pinot and Chardonnay in these conditions.
Because it's so much warmer.
Correct. Whereas we've always looked to them as the ultimate, and we're always bouncing ideas off them, or trying to gain experience from them. It's very, very fascinating that they're now looking to us to. Another one of my friends from Merceau sent his son to do vintage with us here because he wants him to understand how to work in these conditions. Because when he gets back, which he did on Monday, he's taking over the property. He's taking over the family business.
So then Austria, in a way, becomes a reference point.
So Austria
for cooler
is much cooler than Burgundy.
It's got a lovely, leafy.
And so you tend to get very elegant wines in Austria. You get a lot of very high acidity white wines, Riesling, Grüner Veltliner, things like that. And then you have a surprising number of red wines, actually. So Pinot is an obvious one. They have a grape called Blaufränkisch, which is sort of their grape. But Pinot is actually really impressing me, and I'm getting more and more interested in not just Austrian but also German Pinots. So it's a small part of our import portfolio. We only bring in 2 producers from 2 different regions, but we're definitely looking at expanding that because I really like the precision, and I like the fact that it's very much a cool climate, but it is benefited from global warming in the sense that it can now do things better than it did before. It's a little bit like in the south of England now. There's some wonderful wines coming, not just bubbly. I mean, we know about the bubbly, but there's some wonderful table wines, like Pinots and Chardonnays and things like that, which it was just too cold before. You couldn't.
So in terms of like a tasting pack, it's really interesting because this, we don't know because I haven't drunk too many Burgundies from a long time ago, but this is more of what it could have expressed. It's very restrained. It's got that
high acidity.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
Yeah.
Intricate.
Almost like tea kind of. It's got like
There's a little bit of okay, so Gernot Heinrich, who is the owner, who's pretty legendary in Austria. He's quite a character. He's also, no secret, into organics and biodynamics. So that style of wine always tends to be a little bit more, I don't want to say feral, but it has a sort of like a wilder, less sort of predictable fruitiness. It's more, if you take the difference between a cultivated strawberry and a wild strawberry, you'll know exactly what I mean.
Okay.
So this is a wild strawberry, not a cultivated strawberry.
Yeah, it's got that kind of almost animal,
little bit, yeah,
but
not the bad side.
No,
because that you get deviation into that sort of thing.
It's still fresh and it's got a lot of fruit.
Got a bit of a pong.
Yes.
Pinot. I like Pinot with a bit of a pong.
Yeah. But that's always how I thought of Burgundy when I first started tasting it, and I think the profile has definitely changed in that regard. Not at all producers, but
I think everything's changing with global warming, and what's interesting now is how they're responding to it as well, because there's sort of a panicked reaction on how you deal with it. For millennia, for centuries, for hundreds of years, they've been making wines they've been struggling to ripen.
Yeah.
So their reflex is always to try and ripen, which means they've got into trouble with the hot vintages.
They leave it hanging too long.
Correct. And now they're adapting. Now they're also learning little tricks that you can do in the vineyard, such as we do, to protect the grape and to preserve acidity. So they're adapting, and they are the best viticulturists in the world, the Burgundians, because they've got the toughest job because of the grape. They will learn. So,
and they're also not delegating; they're in the vineyard.
No, they do it themselves, and they learn quickly because it's your livelihood, so you've got to get it right. But people are telling me, Burgundy's going to move to Champagne, Champagne's going to move to England, and global warming. Fair enough. I get that. It's an easy explanation. But if you think about the fact that we make these cool climate grapes in our conditions, and we're not a cool climate, South Africa, you can learn to adapt. Yeah. And I think Burgundy will respond to it. I don't think Burgundy's going to lose the crown that it has at all.
I agree with you. And I think, first of all, the actual Vitis vinifera, it's a very adaptable species. It's traveled, it's adapted to wherever it's gone. And humans are, as we've all proven to ourselves over times like COVID, also adaptable. So
there's also, so I'm just going back to the Pinot Noir from Heinrich. There's also a sort of a bit of a slaty characteristic, stony slaty, which dries the palate a little bit. It's a tiny bit of reduction, which some people listening to this probably don't know what that means, but it with a little bit of oxygenation, it will open up.
Yeah. Stunning.
I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I've actually drunk this quite a few times from.
I think this is 12 alcohol. If I probably find my glasses.
It's something like that. And I usually decant it, and it does actually open up beautifully.
Yes, on the nail. 12.
Yeah.
See, that's my comfort zone. The sweet spot for me in Pinot is 12.5.
Yeah. Which is tricky enough. Right?
You can't tell everything by alcohol, but it seems to overlap very, very frequently that I really like a Pinot when it's made in a style that happens to be at 12.5. I think Pinot, once you go over 13, it changes and it becomes...
That heat comes through.
Yeah, for my liking, it becomes a little bit too warm. And certainly 14, it gets tricky. It doesn't mean to say that everything that's 14 and above is not good, because there are certain vintages you don't feel it at all.
Yeah.
But as a rule of thumb, I think Pinots, for me, between 12 and maximum 13.5, that's what I like.
Really interesting. So keep an eye out on Austria and Germany. So now we're moving to... We're going back to New Zealand. One of my favorite wineries.
New Zealand's been very successful. I mean, they are the most focused New World wine region, or country, because there's many regions within New Zealand. They've been very, very focused on two grapes, which is Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir. I think maybe Sauvignon Blanc they're regretting a little bit now. It's been very good for them but they're trying to expand on that now. So there's some great Chardonnays, there's some Rieslings and other things. But Pinot is very definitely their big focus for red. And this Grey Wacky is one of my favourite producers in Marlborough. Mm-hmm. And Marlborough is the northern part of South Island, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the owner of Grey Wacky is a gentleman called Kevin Judd, who's an absolute legend in New Zealand. He was for the first 25 years of Cloudy Bay, he was the head winemaker.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And so that belongs to LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. And that became the most famous wine in New Zealand and one of the most famous wines outside of France. It was huge in the UK in particular. And when he decided that he'd had enough and he wanted to do his own thing and start his own property, he knew where to look. He knew which vineyards, sites, and were the best. And so he's created this wonderful estate called Grey Wacky, which is named after the soil. Mm-hmm. And he focuses on Pinot in the reds, and then Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay predominantly. He does make some Pinot Blanc. He makes a couple of other things, but it's pretty much Sauvignon, Pinot, Chardonnay.
And Marlborough Pinot, I mean, that's where you're starting to get that purity of fruit, right? I mean, if you're looking at...
So Marlborough tends to be quite... it's quite jovial Pinot. It's quite friendly. It's got a sweetness to it. Mm-hmm. I don't mean sugar sweetness. I'm not talking about residual sugar. I'm talking about berry sweetness. Yeah. And it's very friendly. It's very engaging.
It's delicious.
It can be tricky to make a little bit more sophisticated Pinots. This is a more sophisticated one. And this is 2014. This is 10 years old.
Still fresh as a daisy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've never liked it more than I like it now. It's really good now. And that's why in the pack, we don't just want to put 3 wines in. We want to try and give a bit of versatility. So a cool climate, an older one from New World, a classic from Burgundy. That in each varietal, when we do Chardonnay, we do Loire, we don't just put 3 similar wines. There's got to be some diversity to make it interesting and relevant.
Oh, that's delicious, Sam.
Cannot believe I'm spitting it out.
I know.
Gotta drive. That's good. So it's powerful, which is not a word which you necessarily associate with Pinot Noir. It's powerful, and yet it's restrained.
It's a really interesting reference point as well for when we get onto some of the Pinot Noir that you produce, because I feel like, again, South Africa kind of sits in between, this more New World style and Old World.
So this, for me, I haven't looked at the alcohol of this, but I can feel it. This is the cusp. It feels like it's 14. I don't know, but it feels like
13 and a half.
All right. So so that means it could be 13.99999. And you can still put 13 and a half. But it's still
fresh.
Holds it. It still holds it.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's great.
It's stunning wine.
And everything they do is really classy. And his passion is photography. He does these most beautiful images of the landscapes of New Zealand. He's done a number of albums. I have one of them at home, and the photography is just magnificent.
It is a magnificent country. Yeah.
Actually, his calling is photography. His job was winemaking.
Okay.
And he happens to be a very good winemaker.
Right. Oh. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I thought you did. Salut. Right, so here we are at the source of all this idolatry and adulation. Over to Burgundy, or back to Burgundy for me. This is a family that I'm very close to, Chavichouet. They're based in Meursault. And so Romaric, who's the current generation, he must be 37, 38. And he is a remarkable young man. When he was doing vintage with us here in Stellenbosch in 2006, he got a call towards the end of vintage. His dad had a heart attack, so I took him to the airport. He had to fly home.
Wow.
And so at the age of 17, he took over the family estate. His father survived. He's no longer with us, but he survived for a long time. But Romaric took over the family estate. He was really not an adult yet. and he's done remarkable things. In Burgundy, people tend to imagine it's always been demand. It's always, this is how wine is sold in the bottle, with the domain name. Well, when I was young, maybe 10% of the domains bottled and sold their own wine.
Okay, so they went to a cooperative type structure, negotiants.
Yeah. So the big merchant houses, like Louis Latour or Jadot or Drouin, whatever you, Bichot, all of which are represented in South Africa. I worked for the Drouin family, my first job. So traditionally, for hundreds and hundreds of years, the negotiants would buy either the crop in grape form or in must, so before it's fermented, the white juice, for example, or the customary unit is a barrel. So you would buy in barrels. So the growers would make the wine and then sell it in barrel. Or if it wasn't in barrel, it was still sold in units of barrel, even if it was from tank. You still talk about 228 litres. And in Bordeaux, they have 225. Wow. Each region has its barrel shape and size.
And would they select barrels? Or?
Yes, and they have brokers who work between the growers and the negotiants, and they find market for the growers. And so very, very few people in my childhood would bottle and sell their own wines. Domaine de Romilly-Conti obviously did, but there were very few that did. Wasn't dissimilar to South Africa in 1995 when I arrived. You had the Berkelder, who had their big brands, but they also bottled Meerlust, and they bottled 7 or 8 different properties that they distributed. So the same happened in Burgundy, but it changed earlier. Not that much earlier, so a couple of generations. But you go forward to today, and very few domains don't bottle their own wine. A lot of them like to sell, if they're not so happy with it, or if they just want cash flow, they'll sell it to negotiants still. And now that there's been a consolidation of negotiants, there's far fewer negotiants, way more domains. And there's been a consolidation, so there's some very, very big negotiants. And then the ones that didn't survive, they've been weeded out. And the ones that have remained, like Drouin, like Jadot, like Fèvre, these guys do a really good job. So they have a place. They certainly have a place. If a grower's got 0.17 of a hectare, they're going to make 1 barrel, they've got 300 bottles.
Yeah.
So that's no good to distribute to, on a meaningful scale. So you need the negotiants as well. Anyway, so when Rom went back after harvest with us and took over the estate, he said to me, within 5 years, my determination is to build pride in my domain, in our domain. He owns it with his sister, and his mother's still alive. And he said, within 5 years, I will not sell a drop in bulk. I will bottle everything. I thought you're 17, that's very ambitious. Good luck with that one. He did it in 3 years.
Before his 21st birthday, that is incredible.
Yeah. And financially, that's massive because you've got to pay for bottles, you've got to pay, you've got corks, these things are very expensive. And you've got 2 years in bottle before you get your money in. And I don't know how he did it. I don't think he knows, looking back, how he did it. So I just admire what he's done and his tenacity, and I like that. And it was because his father would just sell everything because he got cash in for it and he'd spend it. His father he led a bit of a peculiar life. He liked spending on things he shouldn't. I won't say more than that.
Okay.
Romerick is a very hard-working guy, very determined, loves fun, but he's built this, and he's bought lots more vineyards. He's been very successful.
Wow.
And buying vineyards in Burgundy today is almost impossible because the land is so expensive. But he's almost doubled the size of the property, of the estate.
That's an amazing story. It's a similar age to when you branched out and did your own thing.
That's true, yeah.
So in terms of how, because you chose this wine for a reason in this case. Is this for you a good representation of?
Yeah, there's this notion that Burgundy is unattainable. It's so expensive, and at the top end, it certainly is. The types of wines I used to be able to drink on a very regular basis, I couldn't possibly drink today because they're crazy pricing, and they've gone too far, in my opinion. And I think they will come back a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think they realise that yet, but I think it's gone too far. Things always do before they come back.
Pendulum.
But there are still Burgundies which are very affordable, and this is a very good example of that. In South Africa, this retails for under 400 rand a bottle.
It's absolutely delicious.
I can tell you there are South African wines that retail for more than this, which is not as good. Lots. But he's very modest when it comes to his pricing. Always has been. He always wants people to have a fair deal. That's part of his character, and I love that about him. And this is from a vineyard which is actually, so this is generic Burgundy, Bourgogne. So quite often you imagine that Bourgogne comes from the cheaper areas in the south, where the land's much flatter, maybe you get lower prices. Well, that's often the case for Bourgogne Blanc. It comes from the Mâconnais very often. But his vineyards are in the Côte de Beaune.
Wow.
And so that's
a proper address.
Yeah, so where Pommard stops, literally on the other side of the road, it's Bourgogne. So a vineyard in Bourgogne would be worth 10 units. A vineyard in Pommard will be worth 100 units of money. So it's literally separated by a little road. But it can't be called Pommard anymore because it's on the wrong side of the line.
Yeah.
So it's the reason I'm saying this is because it's right next to one of the most famous red vineyards in the Côte de Beaune, but it's on the wrong side of the line. So you're getting much higher quality than you'd expect from a wine that just says Bourgogne. And he has the same with his whites. So we're Puligny and we're Mercer. So he's based in Mercer, but he owns vines in Puligny and Mercer. And where the two villages join, similar situation, on the other side of the line is Bourgogne. And so his Bourgogne, he's got 2 plots of Bourgogne which are right next to where the village level stops. So he's been very clever in putting together his domain. Well, he inherited half of it, but when he's bought more vineyards, he's bought often when it's on the wrong side of the line because it's much, much cheaper.
Yeah. But
you're still getting a similar quality. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, that's the amazing thing for me about Burgundy is you can stand in a vineyard, where it's €1,000 a bottle, and then you throw a stone, and then
it's either 100,000 or
exactly
100.
Yeah, no, is that? I mean, is that as you spoke about in when we discussed Shannon, like that sort of monk order, the Cistercian monks?
Yes,
where they just documented, they were educated, they documented, they worked hard, and they literally selected these.
Yeah. They worked out
micro locations.
Well, they worked out that in the plain, which is where their monastery is, it wasn't so good for grapes because the soil was too rich.
That's where you have your fertile soil, cattle,
and crops and food, arable land, what have you. And they found that they got much better results on the shitty soils up on the slopes, out of the way. And then they worked out within those locations which were the best slopes, facing north, south, east, west, which ones, what type of soil. So they've realised in the Côte de Beaune, the soils are more limestone, so goes better with Chardonnay. Côte de Nuit, far more clay, goes much with the Pinot Noir. And they define, I mean, the Clos Vougeot was very famous Grand Cru in the Côte de Nuit. What is it, 52 hectares? Something like that, 52, 54, I think it's 52 hectares. And which is a massive Grand Cru.
Wow.
For Burgundy, it's massive. And that today has over, I want to get my figures right, so over 80 owners within it. So everybody has a little parcel or a strip or a few rows. And from the bottom of the Clos Vougeot to the top of the Clos Vougeot is a very different potential quality. So the top of the Clos Vougeot is where the best vines are. And the bottom of the Clos Vougeot, some people say it probably shouldn't be Grand Cru. So they work these things out.
Yeah, over centuries. Wow.
They didn't have much else to do.
Yeah, fair enough.
We hope.
Yeah, I also love how like Burgundy has almost been sort of stratified into those, the village wine, something you drink every day, into the different levels of the crus, and I kind of like that. It's an old way of like classifying wine, but it speaks to occasion.
The thing about Burgundy, it doesn't tell you that the wine in the bottle is Grand Cru quality.
Yeah,
it tells you that the land that the vines are grown in has the potential to make the highest quality wine.
Yeah. It puts more pressure on the wine,
which is a big difference.
Yeah.
It makes it more complicated for the consumer because you could have two guys who are farming next to each other. One's making incredible wine, one's making very ordinary wine. They're going to be selling them for almost the same price, if not the same price, with the same information on the label. You just have to know which one's the good one, which one's the bad one. And that's one of the reasons why Burgundy is so complicated. One thing that occurred to me when I was drinking this just now is that you have some of the earthiness
exactly
of the oil, and the elegance and the freshness, and you got some of the riper, more robust, engaging fruit.
Yeah,
and it's really like the sum of both of those two wines. Actually,
100%. Yeah, that's very well selected, actually. Looking forward to enjoying these wines.
So I'm a sucker putting my own production after Burgundy.
Well, let's do that.
But we're going to make myself look really stupid. So we're going to start on the lighter. These are all relatively light. We tend to, at Radford Dale, focus on delicacy and elegance and balance and freshness. For me, I always want our wines to be refreshing. It's a drink. I'm really not enamored by the sort of the prestige side of the industry and what is a bit pretentious, in my opinion. I like it, as you can see, I enjoy wine.
Yeah.
And I enjoy my friends who are in wine, and we all enjoy it. It's a way of life. It's not a job, and it's something which, in my spare time, which is, I don't have much of these days, but in my spare time, I bring in other people's wines.
Exactly.
And I sell their wine.
Exactly. That hobby got out of control.
Yes, it did start as a hobby, but it certainly has gone out of control. So we're going to start with our Willem Pinot Noir.
Stunning.
2022. And going back to why does this wine exist? Why do Willem wines exist? It's because we want to get wine into people's glasses. And we want people drinking South African wines all over the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, we sell lots of wine in South Africa. It's our third biggest market. But we sell the majority, and the greater majority of our wines are exported. We work in 40 different countries. And a lot of those countries, South African wines historically haven't been very successful or haven't been taken very seriously. So it's been really important for us to make this range a success because, like I said earlier, if you get wine in people's glasses, they're experimental.
Take them on a journey.
But open that door.
Yeah.
Get them enthused about it, because they're not going to order a bottle off a list if it's next to something which they know and they can trust. You have to get them to discover it, and buy the glass is the vehicle that our locomotive for doing that. And we like to, we like to work with restaurants and wine bars and resorts and hotels and what have you to do that, not a supermarket. I'm not interested in making huge scale wines as cheaply as possible. I don't want to spend my life doing that. And so with Pinot, it's very, 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 very difficult to make wine which retails at the level that this does and make a quality wine. So Pinot is already difficult. It's the most difficult. But to be able to make that quality, Pinot grapes are the most expensive grapes.
Yeah.
So that makes it very, very difficult. So what we've had to do, we've had to be a little bit clever about it. So this is made actually from 3 different vineyards, 2 of which are in cool climate areas and one that isn't.
Okay.
So let's start with one that isn't.
Yes.
About a quarter of this wine to a third is from Stellenbosch. Now, Stellenbosch is too warm for Pinot Noir, with very, very rare exceptions. Meerlas are a good exception. They're actually starting to make some cracking Pinot Noir. Slightly different where they are. It's quite cool. It's overlooking the ocean. So we have about a third of this from Devon Valley, from one specific producer, one slope. And then more or less a quarter or a third comes from our property in Elgin. And then the balance, which is a third or a little bit more, comes from, I can't pronounce it, Oerverberg, that area.
Yeah. Like the Hilmenade Valley? Or?
Between Elgin and Hilmenade.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a secret, and I don't want to tell anybody where it
Perfect.
is. Because I want to retain those grapes. Some people who make Pinot have got big budgets, and they can just try and muscle us out, which has happened before. So, and that composition allows us to have 2/3 of very expensive grapes, and then 1/3 from Stellenbosch allows us to bring the average price down. Let's not forget, it's a business.
Yeah,
it allows us to bring the price down, but it's a smaller ingredient, but it's also from a warmer area, so you tend to have a slightly more ripe, friendly, more approachable, and that's balanced with the cooler fruit. And what that does is it means it's you can drink it younger, but it's still serious. There's
so much going on in this wine,
and the value is remarkable.
It's incredible. And so Pinot Noir also, I mean, I don't know too much about this, and if we ask a question like this to a winemaker, it gets very technical quite quickly. But they're different clones, right? So different sort of expressions?
We work with Burgundy clones almost exclusively.
Yeah, and there's like one of the clones gives like a more cassis or dark fruits, or
if you want to go into that sort of detail, 777.
That's the one, yeah,
and even 667.
Yeah,
115 gives you a lot more minerality and structure,
yeah,
freshness or whatever, bright, which is what I love. We love. My team at our own property here in Elgin, Jacques and Gerard have been planting furiously since we bought it 2.5 years ago. And with Pinot, we've only planted 115.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
So with 115, you can make wines that can age.
Yes.
With the 777, etc., they're more engaging when they're young.
Lovely fruit profile.
They're very seductive,
yeah,
and ripe and full and what have you. But then it very quickly goes orange and brown in colour, and it dies.
And was that some of the original plant material that came across to South Africa? The 777 or?
No, I mean, when I first moved here, most of the Pinot that existed was planted for bubbly. In fact, to this day, most of the Pinot that is produced in South Africa today is for bubbly. But the best grapes, the best type of Pinot Noir for bubbly is not the same type of Pinot Noir grapes that you want for red wine.
Got you.
So, you have PN5, PN9, you've got, I forgot the old Swiss clone. Yeah, you've got Swiss clones, Champagne clones.
Yeah.
And they are not made for making red wine.
I think the thing for me about this wine is I just think the tannin structure and the freshness is so bang on. It is.
I really like pretty wines.
Yeah, it really is a pretty wine.
And pretty wines are so much easier to pair with food than domineering wines. And I always say I'm not impressed by impressive wines. They're there to impress you and steal the show. And I think wine is part of a conversation. It's part of a meal. It's part of a gastronomic event, whatever, and it needs to blend in. Yeah. And it needs to enhance and be in balance with. And so I like wines to be fresh. And by the way, I drink a lot of them, so they better not be too high in alcohol.
Oh, well done, Al. This is such a fantastic wine to introduce Pinot Noir to new wine drinkers in Africa. And I think like what we also pushing is that chilled red category.
Okay, so I was patiently waiting for you to finish your sentence. I was going to say exactly that.
Okay.
So, as you know, we make a lot of Gamay as well. We're a specialist Gamay producer, and the only one here in South Africa. But Pinot as well, even Grenache made in a certain way.
Yeah.
You can even Pinotage. We make some very light, refreshing, beautiful Pinotage, and I want our Pinots to be refreshing. And okay, we got 3 different levels. We got 3 different styles within that spectrum. But the underlying philosophy is that.
Yeah. Oh, well, beautiful.
So this is our trust, our educational trust.
Yeah.
Wine.
Thanks so much.
This is our reserve Pinot Noir.
Okay. Land of Hope.
And this is, it's technically from the same 3 as the Vinum, but the proportions have changed. So there's a lot more Elgin in this.
Yes.
And as we've planted a lot of vines now that are very young, so as those come into fruition, literally, their first 10 years will probably not go into Radford Dale, Freedom or Top, because the vines will be too young. And as you know, the type of grapes that you produce from a young vine are not as, you don't have the same depth, you don't have the same definition or what have you, than you do from old vines. So the first 10 years of what we're planting now will go into these 2 wines.
Yeah, beautiful.
So the proportion of Elgin in both of these will increase.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it must have been, I think your Pinot Noir journey has also been, I mean, Chardonnay too, but it's really been redefined by having your own property in Elgin. Because you can farm now to that precise.
You see, the thing about Pinot Noir is it's the grape that you need the greatest control of the fruit quality and how that fruit is produced. And when you're working with growers, even if you've got, we've got growers where we've got 15-year renewable contracts, that's 30 years. Even when you work long-term with the grower, you never have the same control as when you own it yourself, when you do all the work yourself. And so, so what you said is absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
And that's why, with the property that we've bought here in Elgin, we're focusing on enhancing our supply of the grape that's the most difficult, which is Pinot Noir. So we want to own not all the Pinot Noir that we make, but the great majority of the fruit that we make Pinot with needs to come from our own vines.
100%.
Because we want to farm them our way.
Yeah.
and as you know, we're the only organic producer in the region.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get other growers that we work with for other wines, what have you, to convert to organic.
Yes.
Slowly, take time, get confidence, experience, what have you. But yeah, when you have your own, you have total control. And by the way, you still stuff it up.
Yeah, total control, but also in a valley that not all of actually the majority of the wine farms are also apple farmers.
Yeah.
And,
they know how to farm.
They know how to farm. So I think that's one of the things that I do love about Elgin. It's a true farming valley. And I always tease my friends who lived here before we moved here as like, you don't really work and you know. But these guys are up early and they're grafting and they do have calluses on their hands, and maybe they're not walking the slopes of Burgundy, but they're at least on a quad bike on the slopes of Elgin.
It's what's happening in Elgin now with Pinot is very exciting because we don't have old Pinot vines. No. We're starting to have old Chardonnay vines.
Yeah.
But the old vine Pinot that may have existed would have been the wrong material anyway.
Yes.
So the right clones for making red wine are young vines in Elgin.
Yes.
So we are only starting to see
right at the beginning
what the potential is for making great Pinot. I did a tasting. I took some French people to Oak Valley and to Cultivate the other day, last week, and I was really impressed with a lot of the wines we tasted that day. But the Oak Valley Pinot Noirs, just in 2 years, they've gone up to such a level, which is again, this is very much underpinning what I've just said. Those vines are now starting to gain the age, and with the right people looking after them and making the wines, it's fantastic. Yeah,
I think there's a huge dedication to the viticulture side here as well.
And Paul Kluver's Village Pinot Noir, spectacular,
incredible,
similar approach to this.
Yeah,
and it's very, very good. But they make a lot of Pinot Noir. I mean, I don't know how they do that quality in that quantity, which is very difficult with Pinot Noir. Nobody in the country does it like Paul Kluver. I mean that sincerely. It's brilliant. So, and this is all Elgin. So Himmler Nader has gained the notoriety for Pinot Noir until now. But I think, and the reason why we've invested in Elgin is I believe that we have more potential, there's that word again, we have more potential to make better Pinot Noir, I honestly believe.
Yeah.
A different style of Pinot Noir.
Yes.
I sometimes say Himmler Nader is the Côte de Beaune of Pinot in this country.
The clay.
And I think that Elgin has the potential to be the Côte de Nuit.
That's amazing.
Chardonnay, I think Elgin's already showing its worth.
Yes.
So I don't think Himmler Nader has a monopoly over Chardonnay like it does over Pinot, reputationally. But I think that we will be equal to Himmler Nader at least.
I'll just sit back at Belfield and taste the fruits of all of your labour. It's fantastic. Right, so
this just very briefly for the Land of Hope. Stylistically, we're going a little bit up in sophistication.
Yes.
A little bit more sort of sweet fruit definition, not sugar sweet again, and it's just a little bit more classy. And if you went back down to the Vino afterwards, that's more apparent. It's always more subtle when you're going up, but when you go back down again, you think, okay, there's a big difference. Actually,
this Land of Hope, it definitely was one of my standout wines of last year. It was a sort of surprise to me. I think it's exquisite.
Thank you.
Yeah. And now this is the new kid on the block, right?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a in between. I'll tell you why, because this is the 21.
Ah, yes, okay, got you.
So when we were negotiating to buy the property, Brian Smith, the former owner,
thank you,
and his wife Marion, who did a fantastic job in establishing the estate, they wouldn't allow us to buy any fruit. But when we got sufficiently far down the track that it was apparent that we were going to buy the property, he relented and said, "Okay, you can have a couple of tons from the young block."
Yes.
So it was the first time it was cropping. So it was 4 years old, and so we made a wine from that.
Because what a great opportunity to get ahead of the learning curve, right?
Absolutely right. Right. But it has none of the more mature vines in it.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why I say it's a bit of an in-between wine. From 2022, the Freedom is from the entire property.
Yes.
From the young block.
Got you.
So this is a bit of an oddity, but you have to start.
Yes.
And it was a good start.
As you say, you've got to learn and implement in one lifetime.
But given that it's from a very young vine, it shows the promise.
So this is from across the road, eh? Yeah, that's when we took a drive. And that property's got so much life. I mean, what you've done with your team, Gerard, Jacques, like the soil, it's just like a trampoline. It's so springy with all the cover crops, and
it's full of life.
It really is.
It's a very special corner of Elgin, I must say. But it's a huge amount of work, because you don't have any safety nets. There's no chemicals used at any time, whether it's pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, doesn't matter. Zero. Which means you have to build this incredible immune system, which means you have to, the way you do that is you create the most healthy earth you possibly can.
Is it like almost like a gut biome, like we
correct, exactly.
You've got to have your probiotics, you've got to,
So we plant crops, like it can be radishes, it can be lupins, it could be fennel, it can be any number of different things that you're building not only organic matter, but you're also putting into the soil what life takes out of it.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to compact it by, going over it excessively, spraying chemicals, and killing everything, and creating. If you use herbicides and pesticides and chemicals in the vineyards, what you're doing is you're creating a vacuum.
Yes.
And if you don't, you need to repeatedly carry on using those chemicals to keep the bad stuff out. Because as soon as you stop using them, then the first things that come back in are the bad organisms. And
that's why the first year
and then you have to use the chemicals again.
Yeah.
And then they come back. Whereas the whole philosophy behind organic is that you build up immunity, you build up strength, you build up health in the vine, and the good organisms outweigh the bad organisms, so they dominate. And it takes care of itself. So you do have climatic incidents, they call them in France, where there are some years where nature just wins the arm wrestle.
Yes, sorry for you guys, yeah. So nature says sorry for you.
Yes, yeah. So we built that in. We factored in that between a quarter and a third of our crop would disappear every year, and that might be every 3 or 4 years we don't get a crop. We don't know yet, but we're trying to build in enough resilience in what we do that won't kill us. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a credit to you, this tasting and experience, because it's a tipping the cap to your origins, hustling in vintages, building relationships, working in hospitality, and all of that has been a golden thread in your business. Your credible relationships with hospitality, your empathy and understanding of what they go through, creating wines that literally solve problems for hospitality outlets, helping restaurants, helping your good friend Matt with his wine bar, these are, and helping us in Africa, and we're looking forward to some adventures together on some travels to East Africa. It's such a incredible testimony to who you are, and I feel very privileged to be tasting these wines with you, and to explore Pinot Noir, which I've definitely had some illuminating moments with you in this tasting, and I'm very, very excited to squirrel these wines into the fridge and enjoy them over the next few days and see how they develop.
Oh, that's very kind of you, everything you said there. It's an ongoing journey.
Yeah.
There's so much more we've got to accomplish, and I have a very special team. I have a brilliant team. They make me look good. And that's the truth. They really do. But with Pinot, we've got this is a re-beginning.
Exactly.
It's a rebirth. It's another chapter, and every vintage that will come after this will be more exciting than that.
Yeah. And I've already tasted some out of barrel with you, and the electricity in those wines.
We're bottling the 23 when I'm traveling, so I went to have my last taste of it because I'm very nervous about, like I said, right up until it's in the bottle, and even then you don't know. So I went and tasted it for the last time, say goodbye, and getting on the plane. But I just wanted to touch on one thing, because we are in South Africa about to go to elections.
Yes.
And it's 30 years since democracy. And I resigned from my job in Burgundy the day Nelson Mandela was elected president. That was the spark. That's why I came here. And I dedicated, when I got to the point where I thought that my team and we were producing a Pinot Noir that was worthy of putting Radford Dale on it at the top level of our production, I thought, well, what am I going to call it? And so the reason I'm here is thanks to Nelson Mandela. There's no way I could put Nelson Mandela on the bottle. But I've read numerous times The Long Walk to Freedom.
Me too. Yeah.
And I realized that his freedom was also the reason I came here. And it gave me my freedom because in Burgundy, in France, there's rules for everything. And there are rules about rules. And in French legal philosophy, if everything is forbidden unless there's a rule allowing it. In Anglo-Saxon...
When in doubt, no.
Yeah, and that's why the French were saying no. Anglo-Saxon legal philosophy is everything's permissible unless there's the law forbidding it. Okay, so I came here and you can plant Pinot here, you can plant it there, you can whatever grape, whatever trellising system you want or not, bush vine. My first 3 vintages I put the Pinot in a Bordeaux-shaped bottle because I could. I got over that one quite quickly though. So, but that's why I called it freedom. So it was my salutation to Nelson Mandela, but it was also a great opportunity for myself. But when you walk into, doesn't matter if you walk into a Stellenbosch winery or office there, if you walk into Elgin, the first thing you see is a portrait of Nelson Mandela. And we shouldn't forget him.
Yeah, especially in the sun coming
in.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, cheers to that, Al. And cheers to you.